The judge had my binder open on the bench when Derek finally stopped smiling. It was 9:42 on a Thursday morning, and the courtroom was so quiet I could hear the little click of the clerk's keyboard. 3 months earlier, Derek had leaned over my fence at 2 in the morning and laughed at me. "Call the cops. See what happens." Nothing. By the time the judge finished reading my dates, my decibel readings, my canceled lesson invoices, and the retired neighbor's matching log, that one word had turned into municipal citations, an injunction, and a judgment that cost him far more than quiet ever would have. But to understand why a music teacher started measuring sound levels from her bedroom window every night, I have to go back to the first time his compressor woke me up at 1:17 in the morning. Before we go any further, thank you for being here. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, because I always find it strange and comforting how many people have one neighbor story that still raises their blood pressure. A quick note before I start. Some details have been changed for privacy and storytelling, but the feelings at the center of this are exactly how it happened. Now let me take you back to the courtroom, because that was the first time Derek understood what I had been writing down every night. He was sitting 2 tables away in a short-sleeved button-down that looked like it had come out of the dryer 10 minutes before he put it on. He had brought no lawyer, just a folder, his phone, and the same smirk he used when he stood in his driveway with 3 friends around him and revved a truck for no reason except that my house shared a wall of air with his. I had my own folder, but folder is too small a word for it. I had a 3-inch binder with tabs. I had a flash drive clipped into a plastic sleeve. I had printed invoices from parents who had canceled piano lessons because their kids could not hear me over Derek's machines. I had a letter from a retired neighbor named Mr. Alvarez, who had started with 1 page of notes and ended with 37. And I had a city code enforcement officer sitting behind me, not as my friend, not as my advocate, but as the person whose citations had created the paper trail Derek insisted would never exist. The judge turned a page. Derek shifted. The sound of his chair legs scraping the floor made everyone look at him. The judge did not. She read another line, then another. I remember her thumb holding down a yellow sticky note on March 12th, because that was the night he had pointed an air compressor toward my bedroom wall and let it cycle until 2:38. She said the number out loud. 74 decibels at the property line after midnight. Derek made a small noise, half a scoff and half a cough, and the judge looked over her glasses at him. "Mr. Cole," she said, "you will get your chance." That was when his smile started to thin, not disappear. Not yet. Derek was the kind of man who believed every room could be pushed around if he pushed early enough. But the corner of his mouth twitched, and I knew he had finally heard the first crack. I was not born organized. I should say that first, because people heard what happened later and acted like I came into the world with a label maker in one hand and a court form in the other. I did not. I became organized because music made me that way. If you teach 8-year-olds piano over video calls, you learn fast that a 5-minute delay at the start of a lesson can ruin the whole half hour. If a student cannot find their scales book, you need a backup. If a parent forgets a payment, you need a note that says what was agreed, when it was agreed, and what you already did. I had spreadsheets because I had to, not fancy ones, just names, times, lesson plans, payments, makeup lessons, recitals, and the little notes that helped me remember that Maya loved movie themes and Eli got discouraged if you corrected his left hand before praising his rhythm. My house was small, but it was mine. It sat on the end of a quiet street called Willow Bend, which sounded more charming than it looked. The houses were a mix of old ranch homes and 2-story places with porches added in the 90s. Mine had pale blue siding, a sagging back step I kept promising to replace, and one room at the front that I had turned into a teaching studio. I had a digital piano against the inside wall, a shelf of method books, a corkboard with recital photos, and one of those soft ring lights that made everyone look a little kinder on screen. My students were mostly kids from town, but I also taught a few adults who liked evening lessons after work. That was how I paid the mortgage. That and a Saturday morning group class at the community center. Before Derek moved in next door, the loudest thing on Willow Bend was Mr. Alvarez's leaf blower, and even he only used it on Saturday afternoons. He lived on the other side of Derek's house, retired from the post office, with a silver pickup he washed every other Sunday, and a small vegetable garden he treated like a government project. Across the street was Priya, a nurse who worked nights and had blackout curtains in every window. 2 houses down were the Masons, who had twin toddlers and a dog that barked twice when the mail came, then seemed embarrassed about it. We were not best friends. It was not that kind of street. But we waved. We took in each other's packages. We texted if someone's garage door was open in a storm. The house next door had been empty for 4 months before Derek bought it. It was a white ranch with a long driveway and a detached garage in the back. The previous owner had been an older woman named June who grew roses and apologized if her trash cans rolled too close to my curb. When the for sale sign came down, I hoped for another June. What I got was Derek Cole, 38 or 40, built like a man who had once played football and still wanted you to guess which position. He arrived on a Friday afternoon in a black pickup with a trailer attached. The trailer carried a pressure washer, 2 generators, a stack of metal ramps, and enough tools to open a small repair shop. At first, I tried to be generous about it. People move. Moving is loud. I remembered drilling shelves into my own studio wall at 9 at night because I had spent the day unpacking and suddenly needed one little thing to feel done. Derek's first weekend was all banging and backing up beeps and the metallic scrape of ramps on concrete. I closed my studio window and told myself it would pass. On Sunday morning, I took over a plate of muffins because my mother raised me to introduce myself even when I did not feel like it. Derek answered the door with his phone against his ear, looked at the plate, and held up one finger like I had called on him in class. I waited on the porch while he finished saying, "Yeah, just bring it by tonight. Cash is better. I can turn it around fast." When he finally looked at me, I said, "Hi, I'm Hannah. I live next door. Just wanted to welcome you to the street." He took the muffins with one hand. "Derek, appreciate it. If you ever need anything, let me know." "Sure, same." He glanced over my shoulder toward my house. "You the piano lady?" I smiled because people had called me worse. "Music teacher, yes. I work from home." "Nice. That's quiet work." He laughed at his own joke, not loudly, just enough to let me know he had already decided what kind of person I was. Then his phone buzzed again. He lifted it. "Gotta take this." "Thanks for these." That was our first conversation. Nothing dramatic. Nothing you could point to later and say, "There it was, the warning sign." Except maybe the way he never asked my last name. Or the way he said quiet work like quiet was a weakness. For about 10 days, things were fine. Derek came and went at odd hours, but I only noticed because the truck was loud and the driveway ran close to my bedroom window. He had visitors in the evenings, men mostly, sometimes one woman in a hoodie who dropped off a motorcycle and left in another car. I saw pressure washers, lawn equipment, a small boat motor, a dented ATV. He seemed to be running some kind of repair and detailing side business out of the garage. That was not my concern. People hustle. I taught scales to children while my soup simmered on the stove. I understood side work. Then came the first compressor night. It was a Tuesday in late September. I remember because I had a student recital coming up that Saturday, and I had spent the evening making little programs on my printer. Around 11:30, I washed my face, set my phone alarm for 6:45, and got into bed, with that tired but satisfied feeling you get when a long day has been ordinary. At 1:17, a machine kicked on so hard my eyes opened before I understood what I was hearing. It was a deep, pulsing rattle from the direction of Derek's garage, followed by a hiss, then another rattle. My bedroom wall seemed to hum with it. I lay still for a few seconds, waiting for it to stop. It did not. I got up and looked through the blinds. Derek's garage door was half open. Light spilled across the driveway. He was inside with another man, both of them bent over a piece of equipment I could not identify. The compressor sat near the garage opening, and every few minutes it kicked on again. The sound was not just loud, it was invasive. It came through the wall, through the pillow, through the polite story I had been telling myself about moving noise and temporary inconvenience. At 1:32, I put on slippers and stepped out onto my back porch. "Derek," I called. He looked over, annoyed before he even knew what I wanted. "Yeah? Could you shut that down for tonight? It's after 1. I teach in the morning." He wiped his hands on a rag. "We're almost done." "Okay. How long is almost?" The other man laughed under his breath. Derek looked at him, then back at me. "It's a compressor. It makes noise." "I understand. It's just very loud in my bedroom." "Close your window." "It is closed." He looked at my house like I had designed it badly. "We'll be done soon." I stood there another second because I did not know what else to say without sounding like the kind of neighbor everyone hates. Then I went inside. The compressor ran until 2:08. I know that because I wrote it down on the back of a recital program, along with the first line of what became the most important habit of my life. Derek garage noise, 1:17 to 2:08 a.m. Compressor, bedroom wall, vibrating. At the time, it was just a note. I made notes about everything. If a student missed a lesson, I wrote it down. If the dishwasher made a sound I did not like, I wrote it down so I could tell the repair person. The next morning, with 4 hours of sleep, I taught a 7-year-old named Nora how to keep her wrists relaxed during Ode to Joy. I smiled through the whole lesson. After she logged off, I sat at my piano and pressed middle C, then C sharp, then D, because I needed to hear something clean. The second bad night was Friday. This time it was revving engines. Not one quick start, not someone leaving for work. Repeated revving. The kind where the driver presses the gas while the vehicle sits still, as if the point is the sound itself. It started at 12:44 and went in bursts until 1:21. At 1:05, someone shouted, "Do it again!" At 1:06, Derek did it again. I stood in the hallway with my phone in my hand, trying to decide whether to call the non-emergency police line. I did not. I told myself it was Friday. I told myself new neighbors settle down once they realize sound carries. I told myself a lot of things that sound reasonable when you are trying not to become the person who complains. By the third week, I had stopped making excuses. The pattern was clear. Derek worked a normal job during the day, though I never found out exactly where. At night, his garage became a drop-off and repair station. People brought leaf blowers, scooters, small engines, generators, motorcycles, and once what looked like a commercial floor buffer. He pressure-washed parts in the driveway after midnight. He used an impact wrench that made a hard staccato sound like someone firing a nail gun into a coffee can. He had friends who gathered after the work was done, leaning against tailgates and talking in voices that got louder as the cooler emptied. I tried the normal neighbor route. That matters. I want that part understood. I did not start with ordinances. I did not start with threats. I waited until a Saturday afternoon when he was outside alone, hosing mud off a four-wheeler, and walked over with my hands visible because some men act like every conversation is an ambush. "Hey, Derek, do you have a minute?" He kept spraying. "What's up?" "The late-night work is getting pretty hard on my side. I'm not asking you not to work. I know people have schedules, but after 10, could you keep the compressor and engines down? He shut off the hose. For a second, I thought he was going to be reasonable. Then he tilted his head. After 10? That's when the city quiet hours start. I looked it up because I wasn't sure. His expression changed when I said, "Looked it up." Not fear. More like amusement. You looked up the rules on me? I looked up the rules for the neighborhood. Same thing. I'm trying to handle this directly. No, you're trying to tell me what I can do on my property. I took a breath. I'm telling you, the noise is waking me up. It's affecting my work. He laughed. And this was the first time I heard the laugh that later became a sort of warning bell in my body. It was short and flat. Call the cops. See what happens. Nothing. Noise complaints go nowhere. They show up, maybe. I say I'm done. They leave. I don't want to call anyone. Then don't. He bent to pick up the hose again. Problem solved. That should have been the moment I understood what kind of person I was dealing with. But I still thought conflict could be reasoned with if you found the correct sentence. Teachers are trained that way. A student acts out. You look for the need underneath the behavior. A parent is rude, you assume stress. A child refuses to practice, you break the task smaller. You do not immediately assume malice, you assume miscommunication. Derek counted on people like me assuming that. The noise started affecting my work before I admitted it was affecting my health. I could push through tiredness. I had done it in college. I had done it during flu season. What I could not push through was a leaf blower engine screaming on the other side of my studio wall during a beginner lesson. My teaching studio faced the street, but sound wrapped around the house. The garage was behind Derek's place, and the driveway ran along the side closest to me. When he tested equipment in the driveway, the noise came through my front wall like a second instrument, always out of tune. The first parent to say something was Nora's mom. It was a Thursday at 4:30, not even late. Derek had a pressure washer going, and even with my windows closed, it sounded like a jet of gravel hitting metal. Nora was trying to play her recital piece. She kept flinching on the left-hand entrance because every time the pressure washer pulsed, she lost the beat. Her mom leaned into the camera. "Is that on our end?" I muted myself, listened, unmuted. "No, I'm sorry. That's next door. Can we reschedule? She can't hear the backing track." I said yes because what else could I say? I moved Nora to Sunday afternoon and did not charge for the makeup because it felt wrong to make them pay twice for my neighbor's noise. In my spreadsheet, I marked it as rescheduled due to external noise. Then I stared at that phrase. External noise. It sounded so clean. It did not capture the way my jaw hurt from clenching. The cancellations came slowly, then all at once. One adult student paused lessons because evening times were a little unpredictable on the audio. A parent asked if I had another location. Another said her son was sensitive to loud mechanical sounds and cried after a motorcycle revved during his lesson. None of them were cruel. That almost made it worse. They were embarrassed for me. They used soft voices. They said things like, "We totally understand," which meant, "We are not paying for this anymore." By the end of October, I had lost 5 weekly students and moved 3 more to weekend slots I did not want to work. It came to $640 a month in steady income. For a giant company, that is a rounding error. For me, it was groceries, internet, and the cushion between me and panic. I tried talking to Derek again after the third cancellation. It was a Tuesday evening, and he was sitting on the tailgate of his truck eating from a paper takeout container. 2 other men were there, one smoking, one scrolling his phone. I did not want an audience, but if I waited for Derek to be alone, I might have waited until spring. "Derek, can we talk?" He looked at the men and smiled before he looked at me. "Uh-oh. Piano police." The smoker laughed. I felt my face warm, which annoyed me because I had done nothing wrong. This is affecting my business now. Students are canceling lessons because of the noise. I need you to keep the loud equipment inside the garage with the door closed during the day, and after 10, I need it to stop. You need. He repeated it like he was tasting the words. You hear that? She needs. I kept my voice steady. The city ordinance says quiet hours start at 10. He set the takeout container beside him. Lady, I don't care what you printed off Google. I didn't print anything. You should. Bring me a packet next time. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Or better, call the cops. See what happens. There it was again. The line. The challenge. He said it louder this time because he had an audience and because men like Derek perform when they think humiliation is available. I said, I'm asking you as a neighbor. He spread his hands, and I'm telling you as a neighbor, get better headphones. The men laughed. Not hard. Just enough. I walked back to my house with my shoulders straight because I refused to give them the little scene they wanted. Inside, I closed the door, leaned against it, and let my hands shake for about 10 seconds. Then I opened my laptop and made a new spreadsheet. The first tab was called Noise Log. The columns were date, start time, end time, type of noise, location observed, impact, action taken, and notes. I already had memory and scattered notes, so I filled in what I could from texts, lesson records, and the backs of recital programs. September 19th, compressor. September 22nd, engine revving. September 28th, impact wrench. October 3rd, pressure washer during Nora lesson. October 7th, gathering in driveway after midnight. I did not know yet that this spreadsheet would become the spine of a court case. I only knew that writing it down made me feel less like a crazy person. That first spreadsheet was plain enough to look harmless. Black text, gray grid lines, one frozen header row. But it changed the way the whole situation felt, because every new incident had somewhere to go. Before that, the nights vanished into my body. A bad one left me with a headache and a bitter mood, but by dinner the next day, it was just a story I had to retell from memory. Once the log existed, the nights stopped vanishing. If Derek ran the compressor from 11:42 to 1:03, that was not a blur. It was an entry. If a parent canceled after a pressure washer drowned out a lesson, that was not embarrassment floating around my chest. It was a PDF beside a date. That weekend, I read the city ordinance carefully. Not a blog summary. The actual municipal code. Ugly formatting and all. Quiet hours from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. No mechanical equipment above a certain level at the property line during those hours. Separate language about continuous or repeated noise that interfered with the peaceful enjoyment of another residence. I learned that decibels were not as simple as loud or not loud. I learned that A-weighted readings were the standard for environmental noise. I learned that my phone had a microphone, but a phone reading by itself could be attacked as unreliable. I learned enough to understand that if I ever wanted anyone to take this seriously, I needed consistency. So I bought a $42 external microphone attachment recommended by a local audio forum, downloaded a sound level app that allowed calibration, and borrowed a simple calibrator from the community center's theater tech, a man named Lou who had once taught me how not to trip a breaker during a holiday recital. Lou looked amused when I asked. Planning to become an acoustician? He said, planning to sleep. He handed me the calibrator in a padded case. 94 decibels at 1 kilohertz. Set your app to match. Don't wave the phone around. Same spot, same height, every time. And don't stand there narrating over the sound, or you'll contaminate your own recording. You sound like you've done this before. Church drum kit dispute. Long story. The drums lost. That was the first time I smiled about any of it. I picked a measurement spot just inside my side gate, 3 feet from the property line and about 5 feet off the ground, because that was close to where the ordinance said readings should be taken without me trespassing or making a scene. I took a photo of the spot in daylight. I marked the fence post with a small piece of blue painter's tape on my side, low enough that no one would notice unless they were looking for it. Every time the noise started after quiet hours, I went there, held the phone steady, recorded 30 to 60 seconds, took a screenshot of the reading, and entered the event in my spreadsheet. If it was raining or I felt unsafe outside, I recorded from my bedroom window and noted that. I did not exaggerate. If a sound was annoying but below the threshold, I wrote it down as annoying but did not call it a violation. That detail mattered later more than I expected. The first week of real logging gave me 9 entries. The lowest late-night reading was 58 decibels. The highest was 76, during an engine test at 12:31 a.m. I learned what different sounds looked like as numbers. Normal nighttime in my bedroom was around 32. My refrigerator starting up was 38. A car passing on the street was 49 for maybe 3 seconds. Derek's compressor held at 68 to 72 for minutes at a time, then spiked when the release valve hissed. His impact wrench produced short peaks that made the app flash red. It was weirdly calming to see the chaos translated into numbers. Numbers did not care whether Derek thought I was soft. Numbers did not get embarrassed in front of men on tailgates. My first official complaint went nowhere, just like Derek promised. I called the non-emergency line at 12:18 on a Saturday after a group of people had been in his driveway for almost an hour, with music from a portable speaker and someone revving a dirt bike. The dispatcher was polite but tired. She asked if I wanted an officer to respond. I said yes. A patrol car rolled through at 12:52. By then, the music had stopped, and the dirt bike was off. Derek had seen the headlights from down the block and moved everyone into the garage. The officer spoke to him for maybe 2 minutes, then came to my door. "He says they're wrapping up," the officer said. "It was much louder before you arrived. I have recordings." He looked at my phone like it was a plate of food he had not ordered. "You can send those to code enforcement during business hours. We don't measure decibels out here." "So, what happens tonight?" If they start up again, call back." "And then?" He gave me the look public employees give when they are trying not to say the thing everyone already knows. "We'll come back if we're available." Derek's garage light stayed on until 2:15, but he kept the loud equipment off after the police left. The next morning, there was an empty beer can on my side of the fence. Maybe it had rolled there. Maybe someone had tossed it. I put on gloves, picked it up, took a photo, and threw it away. In the log, under notes, I wrote, "Beer can found inside my fence line 8:11 a.m. after complaint. Unknown if related." That was the kind of sentence I learned to write. Precise, dry, almost boring. Boring became my shield. Derek noticed the logging faster than I expected. 3 nights later, I was standing by the side gate with my phone at chest height while his compressor ran. The garage door was open, and I could see him looking at me over the hood of a riding mower. He said something to the man beside him. The man looked. Derek grinned, walked to the compressor, and dragged it 3 feet closer to my fence. The reading jumped from 66 to 71. "Getting my good side?" he called. I did not answer. Lou had warned me. Do not narrate. Do not argue during your own recording. I held the phone steady until I had 50 seconds, then went inside. The next day, he aimed the compressor directly at my wall. I know that sounds dramatic, like I am assigning intention to machinery. I am not. He placed it at the edge of his driveway with the intake facing the garage and the motor side facing my house. Before that, it had sat parallel to the garage opening. After that, it sat like a little metal animal pointed at my bedroom. He looked at me while he did it. He lifted one hand in a slow wave. That night, the compressor cycled from 11:42 to 1:03. My bedroom reading hit 63 with the windows closed. I slept on the living room couch and woke up with my neck stiff and my first student already waiting in the online lesson room. Her name was Sophie. She was 11, careful, anxious, and preparing for a school talent show. I joined 3 minutes late, hair still damp from the fastest shower of my life. Halfway through her piece, Derek's impact wrench started. Sophie stopped playing and looked off screen. "Miss Hannah." "I'm here. Keep going from measure 17. She tried. The wrench hammered again. She flinched and missed the entrance. Her father appeared behind her. "Let's pause for today," he said. His voice was not unkind. That made it worse. "She's getting upset." I apologized. He said, "No worries." But the next day, he emailed to say they were going to take a break from lessons until things were more settled. That was $120 a month. I saved the email as a PDF and put it in a folder called Lost Income. This is the part where I wish I could say I became calm and strategic right away. I did not. I cried in the bathroom. I snapped at a telemarketer. I burned rice because I forgot I had turned on the stove. I lay awake even on quiet nights because my body kept waiting for the next machine to start. Noise does that. It trains you. You stop trusting silence because silence becomes the space before the next hit. I started hearing phantom engines in my sleep. I taught with a headache so often that I kept ibuprofen in the little ceramic dish where I used to keep stickers for younger students. And Derek enjoyed it. That was the part that changed everything. If he had been careless, I might have stayed in the realm of complaints and requests. But spite has a smell, even if you cannot put it in a spreadsheet. He would wait until my studio light came on, then start a leaf blower near the side fence. He would idle his truck in the driveway while looking toward my house. One night at 10:04, exactly 4 minutes into quiet hours, he started a generator and let it run for 12 minutes, then shut it off and yelled, "All good?" toward my bedroom window. The lowest point came in early November. I had called the non-emergency line twice more. Both times the officers arrived too late or did not have equipment to measure anything. I had submitted an online complaint to code enforcement with 3 recordings and my log attached. I received an automated email saying they would review it within 10 business days. 10 business days when you are sleeping 4 hours a night feels like a sentence. On the 9th business day, Derek cornered me at my mailbox. I say cornered, but technically it was a public sidewalk. That is how people like him operate. They choose places where later they can say, "I was just talking." He came out of his driveway as I was pulling envelopes from the box, wiping his hands on a rag even though there was no reason for him to be holding one. His truck was idling behind him. "You been making reports?" he said. My stomach tightened. "I've asked the city to explain the ordinance." "That's not what I asked." I held the mail against my chest. "Derek, I don't want trouble. I want sleep. I want to be able to teach." He stepped closer, just enough that I noticed. "Then maybe stop acting like a problem." I looked past him toward Priya's house. Her curtains were closed. Mr. Alvarez's truck was gone. The street looked empty in that particular afternoon way. All sun and no witnesses. Derek lowered his voice. "You think some little app on your phone scares me? You think a city guy wants paperwork because a piano teacher can't handle noise?" I did not answer. He smiled. "Careful, Hannah. People who make complaints get noticed." It was not a threat you could report cleanly. That was the point. He did not say he would hurt me. He did not say he would damage my house. He said something that could be explained away with a shrug. I walked inside, locked the door, and stood in my kitchen with the mail still in my hand. One envelope slid to the floor. I remember staring at it for a long time because it was easier than thinking about what he had just done. That night, at 12:26, the compressor started again. I did not go outside. I sat on the edge of my bed and listened to it cycle through the wall. For the first time, I believed Derek might be right. Not because he was smart, not because he was untouchable. Because systems are tired, and tired systems often reward the person willing to be the biggest problem. Noise complaints do go nowhere if they stay as little phone calls in the dark, a patrol car, a warning, a shrug, a neighbor who learns how to stop before headlights turn the corner. I almost stopped. I want to be honest about that. I opened my laptop, looked at the spreadsheet, and thought, this is ridiculous. I am a grown woman with a master's degree in music education, sitting in bed at 1 in the morning writing down another man's compressor cycles like I am studying weather. I felt small. I felt foolish. I felt like every version of me that had ever tried to be polite had led me to that exact room, listening to a machine aimed at my wall. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mr. Alvarez. "You awake because of that thing too?" I stared at it. Then I typed, "Yes. Sorry, it's awful." He replied, "Don't apologize." I started writing it down. "Want me to send you what I have?" That was the turn. Not the legal turn. Not yet. But the emotional one. The moment the story stopped being Hannah versus Derek in Derek's version of the world. Someone else heard it. Someone else had written it down. I was not imagining it. I was not too sensitive. I was not the piano police. I was a neighbor being kept awake by a man who had decided rules were for people he could laugh at. The next morning, Mr. Alvarez came over with a yellow legal pad and a thermos of coffee. He was 71, maybe 72, with the careful posture of someone whose knees hurt, but whose pride would not let him mention it. He sat at my kitchen table and slid the pad toward me. "My wife used to say I wrote like a court reporter," he said. "She meant it as a complaint. Turns out it might be useful." His notes were better than mine in some ways. He had start times, end times, descriptions, and little weather notes because he had spent 35 years delivering mail and still noticed weather first. November 3rd, 11:18 p.m. to 12:02 a.m., compressor, west-facing bedroom, window closed, dog barking 2 houses down after first start. November 5th, 10:41 p.m., truck revving, 3 men in driveway, 1 shouted profanity, stopped 10:56. November 9th, 12:26 a.m., compressor or generator, vibration in kitchen window, ended 1:14. He had not measured decibels, but he had something just as important, independent corroboration. "I don't want to drag you into anything," I said. He poured coffee into the thermos cap. "Hannah, I'm already in it. My bedroom is on that side. I just didn't know you were keeping score too." I told him about the app, the calibration, the online complaint, the mailbox conversation. His face changed at that last part. He leaned back and looked toward my side window, where Derek's garage roof was visible beyond the fence. He said people who make complaints get noticed? Yes. Write that down exactly. Date, time, place. I did. He nodded once. Good. Keep doing that. Men like him count on decent people getting tired. Mr. Alvarez gave me more than notes. He gave me permission to become difficult. Not loud. Not reckless. Difficult in the way paper can be difficult. Difficult in the way a locked door is difficult. Difficult in the way a dated record is difficult when someone wants the world to stay vague. The code enforcement officer called 2 days later. Her name was Marisol Grant, and her voice sounded like she had spent her entire career listening to people minimize problems until the paperwork proved otherwise. "Ms. Watanabe, I'm reviewing your noise complaint. You submitted recordings and a log?" Yes, I have them. I need to be clear about a few things. Phone apps are not always accepted as official measurements, but your records are detailed, and repeated complaints can support enforcement if we can verify a pattern. What does verify mean? It means I need dates, times, recordings if you have them, and ideally another resident willing to make a separate complaint. It also means we need to catch or document the violation in a way our office can stand behind. I looked at Mr. Alvarez's yellow pages, which were still on my kitchen table because I had scanned them that morning. I have another resident. Good, she said. Have him file separately. Not through you. Separate is stronger. And Ms. Watanabe? Yes. Do not argue with your neighbor. Do not tell him your plan. Keep your records clean. If he threatens you, call the police. If he makes noise, document it and submit it. Let the paper do the talking. Let the paper do the talking. I wrote that on a sticky note and put it on my monitor. From that point on, I stopped negotiating with Derek in person. If he waved, I did not wave back. If he called something over the fence, I went inside. If he started equipment after 10, I recorded, logged, and submitted. Mr. Alvarez filed his own complaint with his own notes. Priya, the night nurse across the street, surprised me by sending a short email to code enforcement after a dirt bike woke her on one of her few nights off. She did not want to get involved beyond that, but even one independent email mattered. Derek thought he was dealing with one soft-spoken woman. He had no idea a file was growing in 3 different inboxes. The first citation came on November 22nd. It was not dramatic. Marisol had arranged to be in the area after several complaints showed the same late-night pattern on Thursdays. I did not know she was coming. I had submitted that Derek often worked late before weekend jobs, and she must have decided it was worth a drive-by. At 11:37 p.m., the compressor kicked on. I recorded from my side gate. At 11:49, a city vehicle rolled slowly down Willow Bend, with its lights off except for the headlights. Derek did not notice at first because he was inside the garage with music playing. Marisol parked 2 houses down, stood on the sidewalk with a handheld meter, and watched. I watched from my dark kitchen, barely breathing. Derek came out when Marisol walked up the driveway. He wiped his hands on a rag, the same prop as always. I could not hear every word, but I saw his body language. The loose shoulders, the half smile, the little lean that said he expected to charm or bully his way through the conversation. Marisol did not lean. She stood with a clipboard against her chest and pointed once toward the garage, once toward the street, once toward her meter. Derek's smile widened, then flattened. He gestured toward my house. Marisol turned her head, looked at my dark windows, then looked back at him. She wrote something down. The citation was for a first verified violation during quiet hours. The fine was $150. Not life-changing. Not even close. But when I saw the scan of it later through the complaint portal, I sat back in my chair and felt something unclench in my chest. Derek's nothing had become a document with a number on it. He knew it too. The next afternoon, he taped a piece of paper to his own garage door facing my house. It said, in thick black marker, "Happy now?" The mature part of me wanted to ignore it. The teacher part of me wanted to correct the punctuation. I took a photo, logged it as retaliatory display after citation, and went back inside. That night was quiet. The next night was not. This was one of Derek's gifts to me, though he did not know it. He could not leave a loss alone. If he had taken the first citation, paid the $150, and moved his work earlier, the story might have ended there. I would have kept my log for a while, then gradually stopped. Mr. Alvarez would have slept. My students would have come back. Derek would have remained an unpleasant neighbor with a loud truck, which is annoying but not a court case. But Derek needed to prove the citation had not changed him. His pride had a louder engine than anything in his garage. At 10:11 p.m., he started a generator. At 10:13, he put a portable speaker on top of his workbench and played classic rock loud enough that I could identify the song through two closed windows. At 10:19, he shouted, "Put that in your little diary." I did. Exact quote, time-stamped, with audio. The second citation came faster. Marisol did not need to personally witness every event once the pattern was established, and I had recordings, screenshots, and independent complaints, but she still had to follow procedure. She sent Derek a notice of continued violation, then another citation for repeated after-hours mechanical noise. This one was $300. The city also warned that further violations could trigger higher fines and possible nuisance proceedings. Derek responded by putting a lawn chair in his driveway at 9:58 p.m. one evening and sitting there with his arms crossed, staring at my house while his friends laughed in the garage behind him. I was teaching an adult student named Glenn at the time. Glenn was a retired accountant learning jazz piano because, as he put it, "I spent 40 years making columns line up, and now I want to learn how to swing." He noticed me glance toward the window. "Neighbor again?" he asked. "Yes. Sorry." He leaned closer to his webcam. "Hannah, forgive me for giving unsolicited advice, but bill for every lesson you lose because of him. Even if you never collect, make the number real." I'm tracking cancellations. Track the makeups too. Track the discounts. Track the hours you spend dealing with him. If this ever goes legal, lost income is not a feeling, it's a calculation. I almost laughed because of course the retired accountant would say that. But he was right. That night, I added new columns to my lost income sheet. Student name, scheduled lesson, disruption type, outcome, fee lost, makeup offered, net loss, related evidence file. I created file names like 2023-11-28_Sophie_cancelled_noise email.pdf. Was it obsessive? Maybe. Was it useful later? Absolutely. By December, my life had become a strange routine of music, measurement, and municipal forms. I taught children to count eighth notes. I calibrated my app every Sunday. I responded to parent emails. I uploaded recordings to the city portal. I bought blackout curtains not for light, but because the heavier fabric dampened a tiny bit of sound. I moved my bed to the opposite wall, which made my room look wrong but gave me 4 more feet from Derek's garage. I learned that sleep deprivation makes you stupid in small ways. I put coffee grounds in the mug instead of the machine. I sent a student the wrong scale sheet. I cried during a car insurance commercial because the family in it was eating dinner in a quiet kitchen. Derek escalated in ways that were childish enough to sound fake if I had not lived them. He began starting loud work at 9:45 p.m., stopping at 9:59, then standing outside like a man who had discovered constitutional law. He revved his truck at 7:01 a.m. on Saturdays because quiet hours ended at 7. He told a delivery driver, loudly, that some people should move to the country if they wanted silence. He bought a cheap security camera and pointed it toward my side yard, or pretended to. I could not tell whether it was active. I photographed it and noted the angle. The worst daytime incident happened during my December studio recital rehearsal. I had 6 students on a group video call, all playing short pieces for each other. It was the kind of thing I did to help them get over nerves. Kids are kinder than adults in those moments. They clap for wrong notes. They grin when someone starts over. Halfway through Maya's piece, Derek started pressure washing a set of metal racks in the driveway. The sound blasted through my microphone. Maya stopped. Another child covered his ears. A parent typed in the chat, "Is everyone else hearing that?" Then Derek, who must have seen the studio light and the ring light through my front window, moved the washer closer to the side of his house. I muted myself and stepped away from the piano. Through the window, I could see the spray arcing across the driveway. Derek looked toward my house, not directly at me, but close enough. I returned to the computer and ended the rehearsal early. Afterward, I sent apologies to every parent. 2 asked for refunds for the month. 1 withdrew entirely, saying the situation seemed too unstable for remote lessons. That word hurt. Unstable. Not because it was unfair, but because it was accurate from their side. They were paying for a service I could no longer reliably deliver. Derek was not just stealing sleep. He was making me look unprofessional inside the one room I had built to feel competent. I updated the lost income sheet. The total crossed $1,800. Around the same time, our HOA finally entered the story, though not in the heroic way anyone would hope. Willow Bend had a small homeowners association with low dues and a board that mostly handled common area landscaping and argued about mailbox colors once every 3 years. The president was a woman named Carol who had the energy of a substitute teacher everyone feared for no clear reason. I emailed her with a concise summary, the city citation numbers, and a question. Did the HOA rules restrict commercial activity or nuisance noise? Carol replied 2 days later. The board does not get involved in neighbor-to-neighbor disputes. Please contact the city for ordinance enforcement. I wrote back, attaching the covenant section about no business activity that created traffic, noise, or nuisance. She replied, "We are not equipped to investigate sound complaints." It was frustrating, but it also taught me something. If I wanted help, I needed to bring people a package they could act on, not a problem they could dodge. Carol did not want to investigate. Fine, I would not depend on Carol, but I saved the emails because they showed I had tried the available channels. Later, when Derek claimed I had rushed to court without warning anyone, those emails were useful. Every closed door can still become a page in the binder. Christmas week should have been quiet because many of my students were off. Instead, Derek treated the holiday like a business opportunity. People were home, equipment needed fixing, and apparently everyone in a 20-mile radius had a generator or snowblower that needed attention at midnight. On December 23rd, he ran a snowblower engine in the driveway at 11:06 p.m. even though we had no snow. On December 26th, he and 4 friends gathered around a fire pit in the driveway until 2:12 a.m., laughing, playing music, and slamming truck doors. At 1:34, someone threw what sounded like a glass bottle into a bin. I recorded from my bedroom. Mr. Alvarez texted, "Got it too." Priya filed another complaint because she had worked a 12-hour shift and had to be back at the hospital by 7. Marisol called me on December 28th. "I need to ask something carefully," she said. "Do you feel safe?" I looked out at Derek's driveway. He was not outside. The garage door was closed for once. Most of the time. That is not quite an answer. He made a comment in November. He said people who make complaints get noticed. Since then, it's been mostly staring, signs, moving equipment toward my house. Nothing I can prove as a direct threat. You can prove a lot of behavior that looks retaliatory. Keep documenting it. If he approaches you again, call it in. I am escalating this internally because we now have multiple complainants and repeated citations. But I want you to understand the city process is administrative. It may not stop him quickly. What does stop him quickly? She paused. Sometimes a court order. But I cannot give you legal advice. The phrase court order sat in my kitchen long after the call ended. I did not jump to court. That is another thing I want clear. I was scared of court. Court sounded expensive, public, and full of people who could tell me I had misunderstood my own life. I pictured Derek charming a judge, or worse, making me look petty. A single woman with spreadsheets complaining about a man working in his garage. I could hear the dismissive version before anyone said it. But Marisol's comment sent me researching, and research became the way I turned fear into tasks. I learned the term private nuisance. I learned that it did not mean someone annoyed you. It meant an unreasonable interference with the use and enjoyment of property. I read articles written by local attorneys. I read court self-help pages. I read sample complaints until the language stopped looking like a wall and started looking like sheet music. Elements, facts, relief requested, injunction, damages, exhibits. I learned that small claims could handle certain money damages, like lost income, but an injunction usually required a different filing. I learned that some people filed both, a nuisance claim seeking an order to stop the behavior and a small claims action for specific losses. I also learned that evidence mattered more than outrage. Courts did not want to hear, "He is awful." Courts wanted dates, times, readings, recordings, witnesses, complaints, citations, invoices, emails, and proof that I had tried reasonable solutions before asking a judge to get involved. In other words, the boring shield I had been building in the dark. In early January, I paid $180 for a consultation with a local attorney named Lydia Chen. Her office was above a bakery, which meant the waiting room smelled like cinnamon rolls while I sat there with a binder full of misery. Lydia was in her 50s, with short gray hair and a habit of letting silence do part of her work. She listened for 20 minutes while I summarized. Then she opened the binder. "You brought exhibits," she said. "I may have overdone it." She turned a few pages. "No. This is what people think they have when they say they have evidence. Usually they have 12 angry texts and a memory. You have a record." I felt my throat tighten, which surprised me. Does that mean I have a case? It means you have facts worth organizing into one. I can't promise an outcome. Noise cases can be messy, but repeated municipal citations help. Independent neighbors help. Lost income tied to specific disruptions helps. His comments help if they show intent or retaliation. The calibrated app is not the same as a certified meter, but paired with city citations and recordings, it supports the pattern. What would you do? If you were hiring me for full representation, I'd send a demand letter first. Clear, polite, with attachments. Stop the nuisance. Limit work to legal hours. No equipment aimed at your property. No retaliation. Then, if he continues, file for injunctive relief and damages. If money is tight, you can do some of this yourself. The court has forms. I can help you draft the letter for a smaller fee. Will a letter make him worse? Lydia looked at me over the binder. Maybe. But if he gets worse after a demand letter, that also becomes evidence. The question is whether you are ready to let his reaction belong to him. That sentence stayed with me too. Let his reaction belong to him. We drafted the demand letter together. It was not emotional. It did not call him a bully. It identified the properties, summarized the repeated noise disturbances, listed the city citation numbers, referenced the ordinance, and demanded that he cease after-hours mechanical work, amplified music, engine revving, and retaliatory conduct. It asked him to operate any lawful equipment only within permitted hours and in a manner that did not unreasonably interfere with neighboring homes. It stated that if the nuisance continued, I would pursue legal remedies including injunctive relief and recovery of documented losses. Lydia insisted on one line I would not have written myself. My client prefers an informal resolution, but she is fully prepared to present the attached record to the court. Attached record. Not feelings. Record. Derek received the letter by certified mail on January 12th. I know because the postal confirmation showed his signature as a jagged D. That evening, he taped the envelope to his garage door with the words, "Nice try," written across it. I took a photo. Logged it. At 10:32 p.m., he started the compressor. That was the moment I stopped hoping he would choose the easy exit. Some people cannot recognize a ramp when their ego wants a cliff. The next 6 weeks became the part of the story where the trap was built in full view of the person walking into it. Derek did not know that. He thought he was proving he could not be controlled. Every time he violated the ordinance after the demand letter, he added weight to the argument that warnings and citations were not enough. Every time he made a show of it, he helped prove intent. Every time he disrupted a lesson, he increased the damages calculation. It was not satisfying in the moment. Please do not imagine me smiling in a dark window while he made my house shake. I was exhausted. But underneath the exhaustion, something steadier had formed. I no longer needed him to understand. I needed him to continue being exactly who he was until the record was undeniable. There were small risks. One night, he caught me recording from the side gate and walked toward the fence. "You know that's creepy, right?" he said. I lowered the phone only after the recording had captured his voice. "Please do not speak to me. You're filming my property. I'm documenting sound from my property. Maybe I should document you." I stepped back toward my porch. "Please do not come onto my property." He laughed. "Nobody wants your property." I went inside and locked the door. My hand shook so badly I had to set the phone on the counter before I dropped it. The recording was clear. In the log, I wrote his exact words and my exact words. Then I emailed Marisol and attached the file. She replied the next morning. "Received. Continue avoiding direct contact." Mr. Alvarez became my second set of ears and, occasionally, my sense of proportion. He had a dry way of making the whole situation feel absurd without making it feel small. When Derek started using a shop vacuum at 12:09 a.m., Mr. Alvarez texted, "The animal in my attic was quieter and I liked him less." I did not put that in the legal file, obviously, but I needed those moments. They reminded me that Derek had made himself ridiculous. Dangerous, maybe. Cruel. Definitely. But also ridiculous. A grown man spending his nights trying to defeat a music teacher's spreadsheet. In late January, Marisol issued a third citation. This one was $500 and came with a formal notice that continued violations could be referred for nuisance abatement. Derek appealed it administratively, which meant there was a short hearing at City Hall. I attended because Marisol said complainants could be present if evidence was discussed. Derek wore a leather jacket and brought a friend who sat behind him with arms crossed, like he had been hired to look unimpressed. The hearing officer was a thin man named Mr. Patel, who had a stack of cases and the weary patience of someone who had heard every excuse. Derek argued that he had a right to work on his property, that the readings were fake, that I was targeting him because I didn't like working-class people, and that he had never been warned properly. Mr. Patel looked at Marisol. Were warnings issued? Marisol submitted copies of the first notice, the first citation, the second citation, and the continued violation letter. Mr. Patel looked at Derek. "These were mailed to your address." Derek shrugged. "Mail gets lost." Marisol said, "The second citation was handed to Mr. Cole in person on December 9th. Derek's friend stopped looking unimpressed for about half a second. Then Mr. Patel played one of the recordings. It was strange hearing Derek's compressor in that beige little room at City Hall, through government speakers that made everything sound flatter. But even flattened, it was loud. The recording included Derek's voice yelling, "Put that in your little diary." Mr. Patel paused it. "Is that your voice?" he asked. Derek leaned back. "Could be." "Were you operating equipment after 10 p.m. on that date?" "I don't remember." Mr. Patel looked at the citation, then at the log, then at Marisol's report. "The citation is upheld." It was not the big payoff. It was not even close. But it was the first time I watched Derek's words fail in front of someone with authority. He left the room before I did. As he passed my chair, he muttered, "This isn't over." I did not respond. Marisol, who was gathering her papers beside me, said without looking up, "Mr. Cole, the hallway has cameras." He kept walking. After the administrative hearing, the city became more willing to act, but still not fast enough to solve my life. That is not a criticism of Marisol. She did her job, but cities move like cities. They send notices. They schedule hearings. They give opportunities to comply. They document. All of that is necessary. All of it takes time. Meanwhile, my house was still my house, my mortgage was still due, and Derek's garage still lit up after dark. So I filed. I spent the first weekend in February assembling the complaint for private nuisance and request for injunctive relief. Lydia reviewed it for a limited fee and helped me avoid sounding like I was writing a diary entry to a judge. The complaint described the repeated, substantial, unreasonable interference with my use and enjoyment of my home. It described the business impact. It described the warnings, the demand letter, the municipal citations, and the continued violations. It requested an order prohibiting Derek from operating loud mechanical equipment, revving engines, playing amplified music, or hosting loud gatherings during quiet hours, and from directing equipment toward my property in a way that amplified the disturbance. It also requested that he stop retaliatory conduct and comply with municipal noise limits. For the lost income, Lydia suggested small claims because the amount was specific and growing. We prepared that too, but she advised filing it after the injunction hearing was scheduled, so the judge could see the full picture without confusing the requests. By then, the documented lost income was $3,460. That included canceled lessons, refunded group sessions, and students who withdrew after noise disruptions. I did not include vague stress. I did not include my headaches. I did not include the blackout curtains or the microphone attachment, though Lydia said some costs might be recoverable. I wanted the number clean. Filing the papers felt both empowering and humiliating. Empowering because I was doing something real. Humiliating because the clerk's office was crowded, and I had to say out loud that I was filing against my neighbor over noise. The man in line behind me was there for a landlord case. A woman ahead of me was trying to modify a custody order. Real pain filled that room. I suddenly felt silly with my binder. Then Derek's compressor sound flashed in my memory, the way Sophie had flinched, the way he had said people who make complaints get noticed. I stood straighter. The clerk stamped the complaint. The sound of the stamp hitting paper was small and perfect. Derek was served on February 14th, Valentine's Day. I did not plan that, but I admit, the date made Mr. Alvarez laugh so hard he had to sit down. Derek did not laugh. He came home around 6, found the papers, and within 20 minutes, he was in his driveway shouting into his phone. I did not go outside. I recorded from my kitchen window because he was loud enough to be heard clearly. "She's suing me," he said. "Over noise." "Yeah, the piano lady." "No, I'm serious. She wants a judge to tell me when I can use my own garage." There was a pause. "No, I'm not getting a lawyer for this. It's stupid. They can't do anything." That line went in the log too. They can't do anything. For 3 days after service, he was quiet. Not just quieter, quiet. The garage stayed closed. The truck came and went normally. I slept 5 hours, then 6, then almost 7. My body did not trust it, but my mind started making dangerous little bargains. Maybe the papers scared him. Maybe we were done. Maybe the injunction hearing would be a formality. Maybe I could rebuild my schedule by spring. Then Friday came. At 11:58 p.m., Derek turned on every light in his garage, opened the door, and started what looked like a performance for my benefit. Compressor, impact wrench, music, 3 friends. A truck pulled halfway into the driveway with its hood open, engine revving while someone shouted instructions. It was the loudest night yet. My side gate reading hit 79 decibels. My bedroom hit 67. Mr. Alvarez texted, "This is deliberate." Priya texted, "Calling non-emergency too." I recorded until my fingers went numb from the cold. At 12:34, Derek walked toward the fence and shouted, "Add this to your lawsuit." I did. That was the beauty of it. He said the quiet part into the microphone. The police arrived at 12:51. This time because Priya and Mr. Alvarez had also called, and because Marisol had flagged the address, the officers stayed longer. They did not issue a city citation themselves, but they wrote an incident report noting loud mechanical noise audible from the street, multiple complainants, and Derek's statement that he was working on his own property. One officer came to my door and asked for my side. I kept it brief. I said there was an active nuisance case, repeated citations, and ongoing violations. I gave him the case number. He wrote it down. Derek watched from his driveway. He looked less amused than usual. The next morning, I emailed the incident report number to Lydia and Marisol, uploaded the recording, and updated the court exhibit list. The February 17th incident became Exhibit 23. Later, in court, it mattered because it happened after Derek had been served. Before service, he could pretend ignorance. After service, every violation looked like defiance. The hearing for the temporary injunction was set for March 9th. That gave me 3 weeks to prepare. I treated it like a recital, which may sound strange, but recitals and hearings have more in common than you think. You do not rise to the occasion. You fall to your preparation. You make your binder. You mark your pages. You rehearse what to do if your hands shake. You accept that something will go wrong and make sure it is not the thing you could have controlled. Lydia could not represent me fully without a retainer I did not have, but she coached me for 1 hour. "Your job is not to tell the judge Derek is a bad person," she said. "Your job is to prove the elements: substantial interference, unreasonable conduct, ongoing or likely to continue. Inadequate remedy without an order. Tie every fact to one of those." What if he says I'm exaggerating? Then you show the citations, the recordings, the other complaints, and the lost students. What if he says the app is fake? You don't rely only on the app. The app supports the recordings. The recordings support the complaints. The complaints support the citations. The citations support the pattern. Evidence is stronger when each piece leans on another piece. I wrote that down too. Each piece leans on another piece. I created a timeline with 1 line per incident. I printed photos of the compressor placement, the "Happy Now" sign, the demand letter envelope taped to his garage, and the "Nice try" response. I printed the city citations. I printed the administrative appeal decision. I printed emails from parents, with children's names redacted where I could. I printed my income spreadsheet and attached invoices showing my normal rates. I printed Mr. Alvarez's statement, signed and dated, and Priya's short email. I put audio files on a flash drive with file names matching the exhibit numbers. I tested the flash drive on my laptop, then on Mr. Alvarez's laptop, then on the community center computer, because I had developed a new fear that technology would betray me at the exact wrong time. While I prepared, Derek kept giving me material. He posted in the neighborhood Facebook group. "Anyone else tired of people moving into a neighborhood and trying to control what homeowners do on their own land? Asking for a friend." I screenshotted it. Carol from the HOA commented, "Please keep disputes civil." Mr. Alvarez, to his eternal credit, commented, "Quiet hours are in the city code and the HOA covenants, Derek." Derek replied with a laughing emoji and, "Okay, Grandpa." I screenshotted that too, mostly because I knew it would annoy Mr. Alvarez if I did not preserve the insult properly. Two neighbors liked Derek's post. One was a man who lived 3 streets over and had no idea what was happening. The other was someone I had never met. For about an hour, I spiraled. What if everyone thought I was controlling? What if I became the neighborhood villain? Then Priya texted me a screenshot of her own draft comment and asked, "Too much?" It said, "As someone who works nights and has heard the noise from across the street, this is not a homeowner rights issue, it is a sleep issue." I told her not to post unless she wanted to. She posted it anyway. The thread went quiet after that. That was another lesson. Bullies like vague audiences. They like saying everyone agrees with them. But when actual people attach actual names to actual facts, the fog thins. On March 8th, the night before the hearing, Derek was quiet. I should have slept. Instead, I sat on my living room floor with the binder open, moving sticky notes by color. Yellow for city citations, blue for recordings, pink for lost income, green for witness statements. Around 11, Mr. Alvarez knocked softly and handed me a small paper bag. "Banana bread," he said. "My niece made it. Court breakfast." "Thank you." He looked past me at the binder. "You ready?" "No." "Good. Overconfident people miss things. Nervous people check the tabs." I laughed because I needed to. Then he said, more quietly, "My wife used to teach 2nd grade. She was soft-spoken too. People thought that meant they could run over her. They learned." I did not know what to say, so I just nodded. After he left, I put the banana bread on the counter and cried for the first time in weeks. Not because I was sad, because someone had seen the shape of the fight. The temporary injunction hearing was not like television. There were no dramatic objections. No one paced. The courtroom was small, with beige walls, a seal behind the bench, and fluorescent lights that made everyone look tired. Derek arrived 5 minutes late, carrying a folder so thin I noticed it immediately. He had shaved. He wore the short-sleeved button-down from the hook, though I did not know yet that I would remember it that way. I wore a navy cardigan and flats because Lydia said to dress like someone the judge could imagine trying very hard to avoid being there. The judge, Honorable Elaine Mercer, called our case at 9:18. She had a calm face and a direct voice. She explained that this was a hearing on my request for temporary injunctive relief, not a final trial on all damages. She asked if either of us had counsel present. I said I was self-represented with limited assistance. Derek said, "I didn't think I'd need a lawyer for a noise complaint." Judge Mercer looked at him. "This is a civil nuisance action seeking an injunction. It is not simply a noise complaint." Derek's mouth opened, then closed. I gave my statement first. My voice shook at the beginning, which embarrassed me until I realized it also made me slow down. I told the judge when Derek moved in, what changed, what I had done to resolve it informally, and how the noise affected my sleep and work. I did not call him names. I did not say he was trying to ruin my life, even though some nights it felt like that. I said, "The conduct has continued despite requests, police calls, 3 municipal citations, an administrative appeal decision, and a written demand letter." Then I handed up the timeline. Judge Mercer read for a while. "Court silence is different from house silence. House silence can be waiting to break. Court silence has weight." Derek tapped his finger on his folder until the judge looked up, and he stopped. She asked me about the decibel readings. I explained the app, the external microphone, the weekly calibration, the consistent measurement point, and the difference between those readings and official city measurements. I was careful not to overclaim. "I understand my readings are not the city's certified measurements," I said. "I use them to document the pattern and approximate levels. The city citations are separate." The judge nodded. That nod mattered. Not because it meant I had won, but because accuracy builds trust. If I had tried to make my phone into a magic legal machine, Derek could have attacked that. Instead, the readings were one piece leaning on another. Then she listened to 3 audio clips. Not all of them. Lydia had warned me not to drown the court. Pick the clearest. The first was the November, "Put that in your little diary" clip. The second was the February after-service incident where Derek shouted, "Add this to your lawsuit." The third was a shorter bedroom recording where the compressor's vibration made a picture frame buzz faintly on the wall. That third one was not the loudest, but it was the most personal. You could hear my house reacting. Derek objected in the ordinary sense, not the legal one. "She could have recorded anything," he said. Judge Mercer turned to him. "You will have time to respond. Do not interrupt." He leaned back, jaw tight. I showed the lost income records. This part felt exposing. Money always does. I had to say that 5 students had withdrawn, 3 had paused, and several lessons had been refunded or rescheduled because of noise disruptions. I showed emails. I showed my rates. I showed the monthly totals before and after the disruptions. I explained that I worked from home, that the studio was the front room, and that moving to a commercial studio would cost more than I could afford. Judge Mercer asked, "Did any of these students cite the neighbor directly?" "Yes, Your Honor." I handed up 3 emails. Some used softer language, like audio disruption. One directly mentions mechanical noise. I also have lesson recordings where the noise is audible, but I did not bring student video for privacy reasons. "That was appropriate," she said. Derek rolled his eyes. The judge saw it. "Judges see more than people think." "Mr. Alvarez testified briefly. He was nervous, and his voice came out rough, but he was steady. He said he had lived on Willow Bend for 22 years. He said he had never filed a noise complaint before Derek moved in. He described being woken repeatedly, keeping his own log, and hearing equipment after quiet hours from his bedroom. Derek tried to interrupt him once. "You don't even like me," Derek said. Mr. Alvarez looked at him. "I don't know you well enough to dislike you." "I dislike being woken up." I heard someone behind us breathe out, almost a laugh. Judge Mercer told Derek again not to interrupt. Marisol did not testify as my witness exactly, but the city records came in, and she answered the judge's questions about citations and procedure. She explained the complaints, the verification, the warnings, the escalating fines, and Derek's unsuccessful administrative appeal. She was careful, professional, and devastating in the way only a bureaucrat with clean paperwork can be. She did not exaggerate. She did not need to. Then it was Derek's turn. He started with property rights. He said he had a right to use his garage. He said he worked long hours and could only repair equipment at night. He said I was overly sensitive because I taught little piano classes and wanted the neighborhood silent. He said the city was harassing him because I had connections, which would have been funny if I had not been so tired. My connections were a retired postal worker, a night nurse, and a code enforcement officer who answered emails with bullet points. Judge Mercer asked, "Mr. Cole, do you dispute operating mechanical equipment after 10 p.m. on the dates listed in the city citations?" He said, "I dispute that it was as loud as she says." That was not my question. He shifted. "I may have used equipment sometimes." "After 10 p.m. "Sometimes, but not like she's making it sound." "Do you dispute receiving the demand letter dated January 10th? "I got some letter." "Do you dispute writing 'nice try' on the envelope and taping it to your garage door?" His face changed. He had not expected that photo to matter. It was a joke. "Do you dispute operating equipment after being served with this lawsuit?" "I don't remember the exact dates." Judge Mercer looked down at the timeline. February 17th. The recording includes a voice saying, "Add this to your lawsuit." Is that your voice? Derek's ears went red. Could be. Was it? He looked at me for the first time that morning. Not a smirk. Not yet understanding, but irritation sharpened by the first edge of fear. Yeah, probably. The judge made a note. That was not the final understanding moment. That came later. But it was the first time Derek saw how the little performances he had staged for me played in a room where performance did not help him. A sign was not intimidation there. It was an exhibit. A shouted line was not dominance. It was an admission. A compressor aimed at my wall was not just noise. It was conduct after notice. Judge Mercer did not issue the full final order that day. Temporary hearings are narrow, but she granted a temporary injunction pending the next hearing. Derek was prohibited from operating compressors, generators, pressure washers, impact tools, engines for testing or repair, amplified music, or similar loud equipment outdoors or in an open garage between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. He was ordered not to direct equipment toward my property for the purpose of increasing noise. He was ordered not to harass, threaten, or retaliate against me or other complainants. Violations could result in contempt. When she read the order, Derek stared at the bench with his jaw working. Then he said, "So she wins?" Judge Mercer looked at him. "This is not a contest. This is an order of the court." But to Derek, everything was a contest. That was why he kept losing. For 2 weeks after the temporary injunction, Willow Bend became quiet in a way that made the whole street seem larger. I slept. Not perfectly, but enough that colors looked brighter. I emailed former students and said the situation had improved. 2 returned. One parent said they would wait another month. I did not blame them. Trust returns slower than money leaves. Derek complied at first because contempt scared him more than citations. He still glared. He still slammed truck doors at 7:02 a.m. He still worked during the day, and sometimes the noise was legal but obnoxious. The injunction was not a magic mute button. It was a boundary with teeth. That was enough. Then came the violation that sealed the rest. It happened on April 3rd, the night before the final injunction hearing. I think Derek had convinced himself that if he could provoke me into reacting, he could show the judge we were equally unreasonable. Or maybe he simply could not stand the thought of walking into court without first reminding me he existed. At 10:27 p.m., music started in his garage. Not loud enough at first to be a slam dunk, but audible. I recorded from my bedroom. At 10:41, a truck engine revved twice. At 10:46, the compressor kicked on for 40 seconds, stopped, then kicked on again. It was as if he were testing the line, tapping the fence to see whether it was electric. I did not go outside. I did not text Mr. Alvarez. I called the non-emergency line and said there was a possible violation of a court order. That phrase changed the temperature of the call. The dispatcher asked for the case number. I gave it. An officer arrived at 11:08. By then, the compressor had stopped, but the music was still on and the garage door was open. The officer spoke with Derek. I watched from my dark living room. Derek gestured toward my house, toward the garage, toward the sky. The officer listened, then walked to my door and asked if I had recordings. I said yes. He gave me an incident number and told me to provide the recordings to the court. The next morning, April 4th, I walked into court with one more tab in the binder. This is where the hook happened. Judge Mercer had the binder open. Derek had no lawyer. Lydia sat behind me that day because I had paid her for one appearance at the final hearing, using money I probably should have saved for the mortgage. I do not regret it. Sometimes you pay for expertise. Sometimes you pay for not standing alone. Derek looked confident when he came in. That surprised me until I realized confidence was his only tool. He had filed a response saying the temporary order was too broad, that his business was legal, that I was trying to shut him down out of spite, and that any lost income I claimed was speculative. He attached 3 statements from friends who said he was a hardworking guy. One of them was the smoker from the tailgate conversation. His statement said, "Derek never tries to bother anyone." I almost admired the nerve. Judge Mercer began by reviewing the temporary order and the evidence submitted since. She asked Lydia to summarize my position. Lydia stood and did exactly what she had taught me to do. Facts, elements, remedy. She said the temporary injunction had reduced the nuisance when obeyed, which proved the order was practical. She said Derek had violated it the night before the hearing, which proved the risk of recurrence. She said the requested permanent injunction was narrow, tied to quiet hours and specific conduct, and did not prevent lawful daytime work within noise limits. She said damages for lost income were supported by records and could be addressed in small claims, but the injunction was needed to protect the use of my home. Then Judge Mercer turned to Derek. He started strong. Or he thought he did. "Your Honor, this is America. I own my property. I have a right to use my garage. I have bills. She works from home. I work from home. I don't see why her business matters more than mine." Judge Mercer said, "No one has said your business does not matter. The question is whether your use of your property unreasonably interferes with hers and violates applicable law or court orders." She's exaggerating. The judge touched the binder. That is what we are here to determine. Then she began asking about dates. March 12th. 74 decibels after midnight, compressor placed near the property line. Derek said he did not remember. March 16th. Music and engine revving, citation issued. Derek said other people rev engines in the neighborhood too. February 17th. After service, statement captured on recording. Add this to your lawsuit. Derek said he was frustrated. January 12th. Demand letter received. Envelope posted with "nice try." Derek said it was a joke. November 28th. Put that in your little diary. Derek said he did not know he was being recorded. Judge Mercer looked up at that. "You were outside, speaking loudly enough to be heard from a neighboring property during a documented noise event. Whether you knew you were being recorded is not the issue." Derek's confidence began to drain in visible increments. First he stopped leaning back, then he stopped interrupting. Then he opened his folder and realized, I think, that character statements from friends were not the same as evidence. The judge had months. He had vibes. Lydia played the April 3rd recording. It was not the loudest one, but it mattered because of the temporary order. You could hear music, then the engine, then the compressor. You could hear my house clock ticking faintly in the background during a quieter gap. Then, very faintly, Derek's voice saying, "She'll call. Watch." Judge Mercer paused the audio. "Mr. Cole, is that your voice?" He rubbed his mouth. "I don't know. Maybe." "Who are you referring to?" "I don't remember." "The recording was made last night." He looked down. That was the moment. Not the order. Not the money. The understanding moment began right there. In the pause after the judge said last night. Derek looked at the table, and for the first time I saw him do the math. Not decibel math. Consequence math. He had spent months treating each incident like a little isolated burst of power. A compressor here, a shouted line there, a sign taped to a garage, a late-night party, a joke at my expense. A threat shaped carefully enough to deny. He thought if each one was small enough, the world would treat them as nothing. But the binder had made them into one thing. Judge Mercer turned another page. "Mr. Cole, do you recall telling Ms. Watanabe, 'Call the cops, see what happens'? Nothing?" Derek's head snapped up. He looked at me then. Really looked. Not at the piano lady. Not at the soft neighbor. At the person who had written down his sentence on the day he said it and carried it all the way into a courtroom. He said, "I might have said something like that." Judge Mercer asked, "Did you believe that?" Derek did not answer right away. The room held still. The clerk's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Mr. Alvarez, sitting behind me, did not move. Lydia's pen rested on her legal pad. I could hear the courthouse air system humming overhead, a low, steady sound that would have been funny if anything had felt funny. Derek swallowed. "I meant noise complaints don't usually go anywhere," Judge Mercer said. "This one did." She did not say it dramatically. She did not need to. The sentence landed flat and clean. I watched Derek's face as he understood that his own belief had been the mechanism. Not my app by itself. Not Marisol by herself. Not Mr. Alvarez by himself. His belief that nothing would happen had made him keep going after every off-ramp, after the polite request, after the first complaint, after the first citation, after the demand letter, after being served, after the temporary order. He had mistaken delay for permission. He had mistaken restraint for weakness. He had mistaken documentation for fear. The judge asked him one more question. "Why did you continue operating loud equipment during quiet hours after receiving citations and a demand letter?" Derek's mouth opened. He looked toward his friend, but he had come alone that day. He looked toward the back of the room, maybe for support, maybe for an exit. Then he said, smaller than I had ever heard him, "I didn't think it was that serious." Judge Mercer looked at the binder, then at him. It was serious to the people who could not sleep. It was serious to the person whose work was disrupted. And after the city and this court became involved, it should have been serious to you. I did not smile. I did not turn around to see Mr. Alvarez. I kept my hands folded in my lap so tightly my knuckles ached. The permanent injunction was granted. It barred Derek from operating loud mechanical equipment, testing engines, revving vehicles, using amplified outdoor music, or hosting gatherings that exceeded the ordinance during quiet hours. It required the garage door closed during permitted evening work if equipment noise was audible beyond the property line. It prohibited placing or aiming equipment in a way intended to increase noise toward neighboring homes. It prohibited retaliation and unwanted contact with me about the case. It allowed me to seek enforcement and contempt if violations continued. It did not shut down his life. It did not take his house. It did not stop him from working during lawful hours. It simply forced him to live with the rules he had spent months daring me to invoke. Then Judge Mercer addressed the small claims matter, which had been scheduled for a later date, but was tight enough that both parties agreed to mediation first. Derek objected to the amount. He said my students could have quit for other reasons. Lydia pointed to the emails, the dates, the refunds, and the lesson disruptions. The judge did not decide the small claims case that day, but she said something that shaped the mediation. "The documentation appears substantial. Mr. Cole, you may wish to consider whether continued litigation will increase costs." That was judge language for think carefully. Derek heard it. I know he did because his shoulders dropped. Just a little, but enough. Mediation happened 2 weeks later in a small room at the courthouse annex. No robes, no bench, just a table, a mediator named June, who was not the rose-growing June from before, but had the same gentle steel, Derek, Lydia, and me. Derek had finally brought a lawyer, a young man with perfect hair who looked like he had drawn the short straw at his firm. The lawyer had clearly told Derek not to talk much. Derek struggled with that. Silence did not suit him. The mediator asked us to summarize. Lydia laid out the lost income, canceled weekly lessons, refunded group sessions, paused students, and documented makeup lessons offered at no charge. The total by then was $4,820. We were asking for that plus filing costs and limited consultation fees. Derek's lawyer argued causation and mitigation. That was fair. Legal arguments can be fair even when the person beside them is not. He said some students might have left anyway. He said I could have used noise-canceling software. He said not every disruption was during quiet hours. Lydia responded calmly. We are not claiming every unpleasant sound as damages. We are claiming specific lessons tied to documented disturbances, many of which occurred during or around teaching hours and formed part of the same ongoing nuisance. Ms. Watanabe attempted mitigation. She rescheduled, refunded, moved students, changed her room setup, used audio filters, and sought informal resolution before legal action. The record shows that. The mediator looked through the packet. Derek stared at the table. At one point, he could not help himself. This is ridiculous. She made a career out of complaining. I looked at him, and for the first time in the entire process I spoke directly, not loudly, not with anger. No, Derek. I made a career out of teaching music. You made it impossible to do quietly. His lawyer put a hand on his sleeve. Derek. The room went still in that small mediation way, where everyone pretends not to react because reactions cost money. Derek looked away first. We settled for $4,200 plus filing costs, paid over 3 months, with the agreement that the small claims case would be dismissed after payment, but the injunction remained in force. It was less than the total, more than Derek wanted, and enough for me to cover the income hole that had scared me all winter. The agreement included no admission of liability, because lawyers love sentences that make normal people roll their eyes. I did not care. I did not need him to admit it in the settlement. I had watched him understand it in court. The payments came late, but they came. The first arrived by cashier's check with my name written slightly wrong. The second arrived 2 days before the deadline. The third arrived on the last possible day, because Derek could not resist making even compliance feel like a performance. I deposited each one and updated my spreadsheet one final time. Life did not snap back all at once. That is not how these stories work when you actually live them. My body still woke at 1:17 for weeks, as if the first compressor night had carved the time into my nervous system. I still froze when a truck idled too long. I still checked the side gate tape mark even after I no longer needed it. Some students returned, some did not. I found 2 new students through a parent referral, and Glenn insisted on paying for an extra lesson he did not take, because, in his words, this is me investing in the anti-compressor arts. I told him that was not a thing. He said it was now. Derek changed because the order made not changing expensive. He moved most of his work to daytime. He kept the garage door closed more often. A month after the final order, a sign appeared on his garage advertising pickup and drop-off hours, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday. I do not know if a lawyer suggested it or if he finally discovered clocks. Either way, the night stayed mostly quiet. The HOA, sensing a completed conflict it could safely acknowledge, sent a newsletter reminding residents that city quiet hours were 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. and that home businesses must not create nuisance conditions. Carol did not mention names. She did not need to. Mr. Alvarez brought me the newsletter with the relevant paragraph circled in red. "Look," he said, "the board has discovered sound." I laughed harder than the joke deserved. Derek avoided me after that. If we were both outside, he went in. If I came home while he was unloading equipment, he suddenly found something fascinating in the garage. Once, in July, I saw him at the grocery store near the freezer aisle. He looked at me, looked at my cart, and turned around so abruptly he left a handbasket on the floor. I did not say a word. There was nothing left to say. The only direct interaction we had came in August, almost a year after he moved in. I was watering the small patch of herbs by my back step when a socket wrench clattered on his side of the fence. A second later, he said, not loudly, "You don't have to start writing." I dropped it. I stood there with the hose in my hand, water darkening the soil around the basil. For half a second, the old fear flickered. Then I realized his voice did not have the old shape. No audience, no laugh, no dare. I said, "Okay." That was all. Okay, the smallest possible answer. He did not reply. People sometimes ask whether it was worth it. That question always sounds simple until I try to answer. Was it worth the sleep I lost? The students who left? The hours spent uploading audio files while my house vibrated? No. I would rather he had been decent the first time I asked. I would rather have spent those months teaching, sleeping, and replacing my backstep. I would rather not know the difference between a phone app reading and a municipal sound measurement. But once Derek chose the fight, yes, it was worth refusing to let his version of reality win. The strange thing is, I do not think of it as revenge most days. Revenge sounds hot. What I did was cold. Not cruel, just cold. I wrote down what happened. I checked the rules. I asked for help. I let him keep choosing, and I preserved every choice until someone with authority could see the pattern. Derek wanted a world where each night disappeared by morning. I built a world where every night stayed. My studio is quieter now, not silent. Real neighborhoods are not silent. Dogs bark, lawns get mowed, kids bounce basketballs. Mr. Alvarez still uses his leaf blower on Saturdays, though now he texts me first as a joke. Commencing legal leaf activity at 1400 hours. Priya sleeps better on her off nights. The Masons twins are old enough now to wave at me with sticky hands when I walk to the mailbox. Life became ordinary again, which is the best ending I can imagine. On the shelf beside my piano, I keep one binder. Not the whole case file. That lives in a box in the closet because I am not a museum of my own stress. The shelf binder is thinner. It has the injunction, the settlement receipt, and the first page of my original noise log. Sometimes a parent notices it and asks if it is recital music. I say no, just old paperwork. That is all it is now. But every once in a while, usually after a quiet lesson when a student finally gets a difficult passage right, I remember Derek leaning over the fence at 2 in the morning, smiling like the world belonged to whoever could make the most noise. "Call the cops," he said. "See what happens." Nothing. He was wrong about the cops, mostly. He was wrong about nothing. Completely. Nothing is what happens when you complain once, without proof, and give up because the first person shrugs. Something is what happens when you write down the date, the time, the sound, the witness, the cost, and the next violation after that. Something is what happens when the person counting on your silence does not notice the record getting heavier. And if there is one thing I learned from all of it, it is this. Sometimes the loudest person on the street is only powerful until the quietest person starts keeping score.